Welcome to the Painting Coach, and in this video we're going to be painting Abraxia, the Spear of the Everchosen. This is a fantastic new model for the Slaves to Darkness and Age of Sigmar. I'm really looking forward to painting it. Now there are quite a few elements, so it's going to be a slightly longer video than usual. A huge thank you to Games Workshop for sending me the model earlier so I can create this content. Let's get painting. So I've built the model, I've glued it all together. If you want, you can leave the rider off, which in hindsight probably would have been a better idea. And I've primed it with a black primer. We'll paint the beast first, and we're going to get started with some Lupercal Green. Now I'm going to be dry brushing this, so I'm going to paint the entirety of the beast, or the bits that I can reach, using this colour. And I'm going to be dry brushing it using my Artis Opus Series D dry brushes. Now I've done this a little bit too wet to get started. I got a little bit excited. So I am probably going to have to do 2 coats of the Lupercal Green. Next up, I'm going to go to Sons of Horus Green and start dry brushing towards the bottom of the beast. So this is taking into account its underbelly as well as its legs, feet, and I guess their hands and face. So really all I'm doing is dry brushing in a downward motion to build up the colour and the opacity the further down we go. Because if you look at the box art, these areas are much lighter and we want to get a nice smooth transition from the dark to light, and this is how we do it. I'm then going to take a mix of 2 parts Sons of Horus Green and 1 part Ionrach Skin. And what I'm going to look to do with this is further brush down towards the bottom of the feet and of the arms. So I'm starting probably about halfway up the leg. I'm getting the underbelly in. And again, I'm continuing to dry brush. This is a fairly easy set of steps to do. Moving forward, I'm going to go to a 1-to-1 mix of Sons of Horus Green and Ionrach Skin. Again, this is nice and light, and it builds up gently as you just dry brush it further and further down the legs. Now, because I'm using mixes here, I've got them on my wet palette, so if I do need to go back and blend them a little bit, I can do that quite simply. At the moment, though, it seems to be going okay. The final dry brush for now is with pure Ionrach Skin, and this is just focusing on the ankles, the feet, the wrists, and the hands. This gives you a much brighter effect on this area, but we are going to go in and kick up that value a little bit more as we carry on. When that's completely dry, add some Khorne Green shade over the entirety of the flesh of the beast. Now, this is to make sure that it gets into those recesses, but it also starts to unify the colour scheme a little bit, and if your blending is not quite on point, it'll start to bring it all together. Once you're happy with it, the next thing we need to do is, while it's still wet, is take some pure contrast medium and brush this over those lighter areas on the hands and the feet. And what this will do will thin out the Khorne Green shade, so it's not quite as powerful. And whilst it won't leave you with the completely Ionrach Skin area, it will leave it a lot lighter, and that's important for the next steps. Firstly, we'll use Ionrach Skin to start to build up in those areas where we've just washed. Now, it's important the Khorne Green shade is dry before you do this, and make sure you've just got a little bit on your brush. This is just going to be the traditional layer painting style. We're looking to catch those sharp edges, such as the knuckles, any little bits of veins that we've got popping out, as well as any ridges. And we want to use dots and dashes in some of these areas just to build some fleshy texture. We'll finish up the lighter areas using Deepkin Flesh. And again, we're going to thin this down a little bit and make sure we haven't got too much on our brush. We want to paint this inside the Ionrach Skin from the previous stage. This is nice and simple, it shouldn't take too long. Just work your way across the model, building it up gently. Now there are a few scales on the shoulders of the model, so what we're going to do is take some black Templar contrast paint and just paint this over those scales. Now if you did want to blend this into a darker colour, you can maybe put some Nuln Oil over that top half where it starts to meet the armour as well. You don't have to do that, we just want to get the scales painted. I'm then going to unify all of the black using Abaddon Black. Now this isn't my black of choice, but I did want something slightly more satin than the traditional matte black I use, so I just painted all the black armour with Abaddon Black, very thin down. Now it's time for the gold. The colour I used for this was Dragon's Gold by 2 thin coats. Now you can use Retributor armour, work absolutely fine. There's quite a lot of it, so just take your time painting this, and this probably is going to be the most time-consuming part of the model. So just paint all the trim, being careful around the flesh of the beast that you've already finished. And generally, you can afford to be a little bit messy along the armour plates because we will go back and tidy them later on. Now, I wanted to go for a little bit of a dirtier gold than I traditionally do. I normally do a warm gold, but we're going to go for something a little bit more chaosy. So to do that, I'm going to shade all of the gold using Agrax Earthshade. Now again, you can afford to be a little bit messy with this because we will paint over the areas where we're going to spill it, but just make sure you don't put it on too thickly because we don't want it to be too dark and too stark. And if we do spill it, we don't want any nasty ridges when we paint back over it. Once that's completely dry, we'll start highlighting, and the colour I'm going to use for this is Glistening Gold, again from 2 thin coats, but if you've got Liberator Gold, that's absolutely fine. The key I find with both of these paints is to make sure that they're very well shaken and well mixed. Now, I use a Vortex mixer to save my arm and my shoulder, but if you haven't got one, you just have to give it a really, really good shake. In terms of applying the paint, this is fairly straightforward. Generally, we want to drag it along the edges of the gold armour, particularly those ones facing up that are going to catch little bits of light. You'll start to see the armour come to life as you do this. Just take your time, make sure you haven't got a huge amount on your brush, and as you drag it along the edges, you'll get nice crisp highlights. This is an optional stage, but if you did want to push how bright the gold armour is, then I'm going to use some white gold from Pro Acryl. I'm just going to dab this on the sharpest parts that are going to catch that light. So we've got things like the top of the spikes and the sharpest areas of each bit of this trim. Now, I'm sure you're grateful all the gold is done. Like I said, that is the most involved part on this mini. We're going to do all of the silver next. So the colour I'm going to use for this is dark aluminium from Vallejo. You can use lead belcher if that's what you've got. Absolutely fine, no problem. There's not a huge amount of silver. We've got things like the spiky parts of the polearm, but mainly it's going to be all the buckles that we've got across all the leather straps, as well as some of the chainmail on Abraxia herself. We'll wash this with a little bit of Nuln Oil. Very simple and straightforward step that I won't dwell on too long. You just want to make sure that it doesn't pool heavily in the recesses. When that's completely dry, we'll highlight it using chrome from Vallejo Model Air. If you haven't got this, something like Rumafang steel will work absolutely fine. So make sure you've got a good tip on your brush, not too much paint. And again, similar to the gold, you can just drag this along the sharp edges to get a really nice crisp highlight. What I'd say with this is a very bright colour in comparison to what's underneath it, so just take your time and add it fairly sparingly to start with. You can always go back in and add more if you want to later on. For the next set of colours, we're going to shade them all at the same time. So we're going to get the base colours down first and then we'll come back in. Firstly, we're going to paint all of the leather straps, and the colour we're going to use for this is Dryad Bark. Now, this is a nice desaturated dark brown colour. All I'd say is be very careful around bits you've already finished, but generally you can work it in fairly simple and fairly straightforward. It'll probably go down in one coat as well. Just remember, there are a lot of leather straps, and I'll also paint all the wraps with this as well. Next up, we've got the horns on the beast and the horns on Abraxia's head herself. So we're going to base these in a dark grey. Now the colour I'm going to use is Mechanicus Standard Grey. Again, this is a great paint that goes down fairly easily, and you can get away with just one coat. Again, being careful around those bits that you've already finished. Finally, we'll paint the scaly hide on Abraxia's left shoulder. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this paint, but I am going to use it because it is a good base for this. It's Gal Vorbach Red. Now, I find this to have a really painful consistency and covers mainly 2 or thin coats here. We're then going to shade all those areas that we painted with brown, with the grey, and with the Gal Vorbach Red using Nuln Oil. Nice and easy stage. If I was thinking earlier, we could have done this at the same time we did the silver base, but I wasn't quite thinking about that. But we'll get this all done nice and easy, and then we'll come back and start highlighting. The first highlight we'll do is on all the leather, and the colour we're going to use for this is Gawthor Brown. Generally, what we want to do is drag your brush along the edges of the leather, and if we want to add some texture in, you can use some dots and dashes in there as well. This is a nice, easy step, but again, there's quite a lot of leather, so make sure you highlight all the bits that you need to. While I've got that Gawthor Brown out, I'm also going to base all the teeth, and I'm also going to go in and base the skulls that we've got on the model. There's only one, but we will need to lighten it up, so it helps to use this colour as it just makes that jump a little bit easier later on. To add a little bit more texture and brightness to the leather, you can take some Karak Stone, and again, we're going to paint this in the same way we painted the first highlight, but we want to keep it inside the Gawthor Brown, so that it just gives you that nice transition of light. I'd use this very sparingly, and I'd use it in just little dots and dashes as you highlight, just to create that texture. You can also use this on the teeth as well to start to build them up to the brighter bony colour that we're going for. For the horns, I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball in. We're actually going to darken them down a little bit. And we're going to do this using some Horus Black, which is a very, very dark grey colour. Now, if you want, you can add another coat of Nuln Oil, but I just thought this will give me what I want quicker, and it'll dry quicker as well. So I'm just going to dry brush some Horus Black towards the edges of the horns to give us that dark, aged effect right at the end that shows that they're growing out. And as we start to highlight, they'll become lighter towards the centre. They're going to go back to Mechanicus Standard Grey. and start to highlight the horns. Now this is a nice and easy, straightforward step. Essentially, you're just going to drag your brush along all of the ridges. So this will give you a nice crisp highlight that conforms to the shape of the model. Don't worry if it's a little thick in some places, because we are going to build these highlights up as we go. So don't forget, I'm doing this on the beast's head and also Abraxia's horns as well. The next highlight on the horns, to make them a little bit more earthy, is going to be with Agrax Stone. Now I've thinned this down quite a bit, and that's to make sure that it goes on nice and thin. It will blend into the colour underneath it. So generally what we're looking to do is just catch the top ridges again. But on the horns of the beast in particular, we want to paint down, as we come closer to the head, we want to build up that Agrax Stone so it gets lighter and lighter, just to give the impression that this is where the fresh bone is growing from. Now, as you paint it on, you may need to put a second layer just to emphasise the Agrax Stone highlight, but generally you get a much more earthy tone than you would if you were just using something like Dawnstone. Finally, we'll highlight using some bright ivory. Now, this is just to catch the sharpest patches of the horns, and this is a much brighter colour than anything we've used so far. This is from Pro Acryl. If you haven't got that, you can try something like Screaming Skull, mix a little bit of white into it maybe, just to get the brightness that you need. And this is going to be used very, very sparingly, just to give the impression of really, really sharp bone. I'm also going to paint the teeth with it as well, and that'll be them done. To highlight the scales on the shoulder, we'll first take some Screamer Pink, and we're looking to just catch the raised edges, leaving the darker colours in those recesses. So just work your way front to back, and you'll get a nice highlight that'll, as it dries, blend into the colours underneath, so it'll be fairly subtle. We'll finish that highlight using Pink Horror, and again we're looking to focus on the sharpest parts of this. So we're just going to touch it across the tops of the scales, and again that should give you a nice subtle highlight. It'll look bright before it dries, but as it dries it'll just blend in quite nicely. We'll base all the red next, and the colour I'm going to use that is Khorne Red, because I want a nice dark red rather than something that's too bright. So we've got things like the cloak, we've also got the tattered material hanging under the shoulder guards, and we've got the infernal blade on this spear. Now we will dull this down, but it's important that we get a dark red base to start with. I'm also going to paint the tongue of the beast and that Chaos Star scar that it's got on its left leg, and whilst this might look a bit weird, it'll all come clear how this is going to work in a moment. So when that's all dry, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take some Nuln Oil and shade the blade of the spear. And then when that's dry, we're going to shade it again. Now, we could have used a mix of red and black here, and if that's what you'd rather do, feel free to do so. We just want it to be a very, very dark red, and that's why I'm going with the 2 shades of Nuln Oil. Then, taking my own advice from the previous step, I decided to mix some black and Khorne Red together. So there's 1-to-1 Khorne Red and Abaddon Black. And I'm going to use this to paint into the recesses of the cloth and the material. Now, this is going to be a little bit more subtle than if I was using a wash. Also makes it easier to clean up and easier to build up the highlights as well. So I'm just painting this into the shadow areas where I think there's going to be a little bit of darkness because of the way the cloak is fluttering and also the folds of the material. If you want to get your shadows darker, you can add a little bit more black into that mix. And again, just paint this into the darkest shadows. And again, that'll just help with the contrast on the cloak. To start to build up the highlights on the cloak, I'm going to take a 50-50 mix of Mephiston Red and Khorne Red. And there's nice big sweeping areas on the cloak here that you can paint this into. So don't be scared, don't be shy, just paint it on and you'll start to really build up a nice rich red. If you have any issues or you go over some bits you've already finished, then you can just use a little bit of Khorne Red to blend it back down a bit if you do go too far. The next highlight is going to be a lot more focused, and we're going to use Evil Sun Scarlet, which is a much brighter red than any we've used before. And what we're going to look for here is to paint it along the most raised folds of the cloak, and this is going to start to help us build up some nice highlights. Again, if you make any mistakes, you go too thick, you can always go back in with the previous colours to cover it up. The last highlight on the red of the cloak is going to be with Trollslayer Orange. Now, it's really important to paint this inside the Evil Sun Scarlet of the previous step. And the reason for that is it's going to give us a nice, very fine highlight that just emphasises the parts of the cloak that are catching the most light. So take your time, don't use too much paint for this, and just add more if you feel you need it. On to the tongue and the scar then. So we're going to take a 50-50 mix of Khorne Red and Kislev Flesh. Now, this might seem like an odd combination, but it actually gives you a nice pinky red colour. And what we're going to do on the scar is we're just going to drag the brush along the shape of the model. And then for the tongue itself, we're just going to paint little horizontal lines across the entirety of the tongue, leaving that Khorne Red in the recesses underneath. and we're going to start to build up that tongue texture. We'll then use pure Kislev Flesh, again on the scar, just dragging it across there to get some nice crisp highlights. When it comes to the tongue, we're going to focus on the parts that are sticking out from the mouth, not so much the bits inside the mouth. And we're going to make sure that our highlights are much smaller, so we're talking little dots and dashes towards the edge of the tongue itself. The final highlight, which is a bit more refined, is going to be with Flayed One Flesh. So what we're looking to do here is use it fairly sparingly, and on the scar, only highlight the sharpest parts. And for the tongue, we're really only focusing on that little bit that's folded and extending out past the mouth. Maybe some little dots and dashes further in if we feel we need it. We're going to highlight that blade next, and this is quite difficult to demonstrate properly, but we'll do our best. The first thing we're going to do is highlight it all using Mephiston Red. And what we're looking to do here is just drag it along the edges of the model, getting some nice crisp highlights. We're also going to paint the entirety of the second half of the blade in this, and by the second half of the blade, I mean the bit that goes from the hilt up to about halfway. So we want to paint that all in with the Khorne Red. We want to highlight all those cracks as well. We'll then take some Evil Sun Scarlet and highlight the same areas we did in the last step, just making sure that we're trying to keep it inside the Mephiston Red. As for the blade itself, we're not going to quite highlight the entirety of the second half, going from the hilt up to about halfway. We're probably going to go for about 3/4, and this is going to start to add in that glow effect. Next, we'll take some Troll Slayer Orange, and we're really focusing this inside all of the cracks, but also we're going to go for about halfway of the second half, so about 1/4 of the blade from the hilt onwards. We're going to paint with the Troll Slayer Orange, and perhaps more importantly that, we're going to paint back towards the hilt. And the reason we're painting back towards the hilt is that's where we want the brighter colour, so we want to deposit the most paint. So just take your time with this. If you put too much on, or the transition between the red and the orange is too much, you can always feather that nice and easily using Evil Sun Scarlet. The next step is to take some Iriel Yellow and do exactly the same thing, except we're going to focus this probably on the last 1/4 of that little bit of the blade. Again, painting back towards the hilt, because that's where we want the brightest area to be. Now, Iriel Yellow is a nice thin paint. Just make sure you haven't got too much on your brush and build up that area nice and slowly. I'm also going to edge highlight just the tip of the blade to get a nice crisp highlight, because we're going to make that look hot as well. Finally, we'll take some Dawn Yellow, which is a much brighter colour, and we're going to focus this right back towards the hilt. So we want to try and blend it in if we can, not by doing anything special, just making sure we've got very little on our brush. We also want to paint it around the elements that we've got there. And for that part of the Chaos Star we've got pointing forward, we want to edge highlight that as well, because that just gives the impression that it's glowing white hot because of all of the energy coming through. And again, we'll just paint the tip of the blade as well. Now, if I was in any way sensible, I would have painted the flame at the same time as the sword, but I'm not. So I'll just run you through this very quickly. It's done in a very similar way to the previous step. Firstly, I get a nice solid base coat of Mephiston Red down. Now, this did take me 2 coats. I'm then going to take some Evil Sun Scarlet and paint the majority of the flame, just leaving that Mephiston Red whisper out to the end a little bit. I'm then going to paint Troll Slayer Orange on about half of the flame, focusing it towards the source, because that's where the heat is coming from. When that's dry, I'm going to take some Iriel Yellow again, probably paint the bottom 1/4. Now, what you can see here is I put too much Iriel Yellow on, but that's a nice easy fix. I'm just going to take some Troll Slayer Orange and paint this into that transition. And this is going to give me a nice little blend here where, without working too hard. Now, if you're not happy with it, you can always add more Troll Slayer Orange. Finally, we'll fill the source of the ignition, which is the brightest part, with Dawn Yellow. So just work this into the flame itself. Now, again, if you put too much on, you can take a little bit of Iriel Yellow to help get you out of jail. This is one of those parts where it's a little bit challenging, but it's a nice skill. And once you've learned it and you've got it, it's happy days. You don't have to worry about it again in the future. You can just build on it. The last thing we do before you can go off and finish basing the model is to highlight the armour. Now, there's quite a lot of this, so I'm going to take some Dark Reaper. And on the parts of armour that have got sharp edges, it's really easy to do this. You just drag the brush along the edge to get that highlight. Where you can't do this, I'm just going to follow the box art style, which is highlighting inside the armour plate itself, just to help it pop up and add some separation. Now, if you want to, you can do area highlights here, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do the edges. If it goes on too thick or you're not happy, again, it's really easy to paint over with some Abaddon Black. Once you're happy with that, we'll go on to the next highlight, and this is with Thunderhawk Blue. And again, where we can drag this along the sharp edges of the armour to get nice crisp highlights. And where we can't, we just want to make sure we've got a good tip on our brush. Now, this is one of those parts that can be a little time consuming and a little frustrating, but I encourage you to stick with it. Again, if you do make any mistakes, you can always paint back over it with the colours underneath. The final highlight we'll do is with Fenrisian Grey. We want to use this fairly sparingly. So where we've got sharp bits of armour, we just want to put it on the sharpest corners by dotting it on the edge. And where we've got the nice big panels on the beastie itself, we're just going to focus towards the top of these areas, making sure we paint it inside the Thunderhawk Blue, but again, using it very sparingly and only adding more if we feel we need it. So there we have it, Abraxia is done. You can base her to match the rest of your Slaves to Darkness army, and she is ready to cause havoc in the name of the Everchosen. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and a comment down below, and check out all of my other content here. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.